Hello and welcome to another of my little videos. We're going to have a look at this fella. I mentioned him in a previous video, and it's Reaper's 3D printed wizard. This has caused a bit of a problem online, actually, on the Reaper forum. People have been saying, we don't want 3D printed. 3D printed not good. We don't like it. Well, I think they're basing it basically on the home 3D printing setups, the sort of $300–400 ones that you can get. I think this is quite a bit different, to be absolutely honest with you. I think Reaper have spent a lot of money on a 3D printer, possibly more than one, and it does seem to be a way that they're going. So what I thought was I'd have a look and show off this little chappy here, and we'll paint him. And we'll see how he takes paint, we'll see how he machines, works and does all other sorts of things, and yeah, we'll go from there. So first off, it's a slightly matte material. It's quite nice, it's very rigid, no mould lines, so clean up is very easy. The only thing I can see is there is a slight, if you can see that on the camera there, a slight little dink there that needs filing off, and to be fair, that's about it. So I'll get on with that now. We'll see how it works. I have my trusty file here. Put on the Optivisor because the old eyes are getting a bit dim, and we'll just file that. I don't know if you there you can see what it is, hopefully. And here we go. Now I must stress, while doing this, I am in no way, shape or form a professional painter. You will probably learn very little from me, but you will get to see a road test of how this thing works. So okay, so let's just file that bit off. Do a little bit down there. There. Now, I don't know if you can pick that up, but actually that's come off very well and didn't take 5 minutes. It's left a slightly textured surface, so I'm just going to bosh that. I've got one of these very fine sanding pads that you can get there. They've got a foam core to them. I'm just going to rub that over the offending area. And, well, there you go. Bingo. Look at that. You wouldn't know it was there now. That's pretty good. I'm impressed with that. And the beauty is, of course, no mould lines. So, he's been produced out of a vat of goo, I would assume. We better clean him, just make sure. We'll go through the standard prepping thing. So here's my little pot of soapy water. There we go. Any goes. He don't float. Oh well. You never know, sometimes these things. Give him a wash. You don't have to go mad. It's just to get any, I mean, with some figures, with resin figures, you've got mould release. With metal figures, you've got talcum powder. I don't know, God knows what they use with these, but there could be something on them. We want to get the paint to stick as best we can, so there we are. He's had a little wash now. Now I shall dry him, and then we'll apply him to his base. Right, welcome back. Here he is, all nice and clean. I've done that tiny little bit of tidying up. He's now mounted on a holding base, which is just a piece of turned wood, and well, some bees putty. You can use plasticine, you can use blue tack. It don't have to be anything special, but it just allows you to hold and manipulate the miniature without it falling off. There we go. And keep your hands away from it. So now we're going to give it some primer, as it's a Reaper miniature, and I have the stuff. This is Reaper, the Optivisor. This is Reaper Grey Primer. We can talk about primers in a later video, but generally primer does affect the top coat quite a bit. If you use a dark primer, light colours will be a struggle. If you use a light primer, generally it makes everything sort of lighter, so blacks will sort of become greys. If you use a grey primer, things sort of hit in the middle. And this fella, I mean, there's not going to be anything too snazzy. He's a travelling wizard. Possibly a wise man. You could even say he's probably could be a cleric. He's got these books there with him, so he ticks a lot of boxes, but I don't think he's going to be overly ornate. I'm thinking this is going to be fairly brown and he's in his travelling garb. I mean, he's not going to be going through thorns and thickets and God knows what else in medieval times. And yes, he's going to be dressed for it. He might have better robes on underneath, but for the outside, I was thinking brown, and of course the backpack will be leather, so that's all different browns. 90% of fantasy painting is browns. Anyway, here we go. We will now prime him with this stuff, and I'll show you when he's dry. Right, here we are back again. He's had a couple of coats of the grey primer, and he doesn't look a great deal different, does he? There we are. Have a quick look at that. I'll take some stills and pop into the video. But yeah, he's now ready for painting. He looks very shiny, I have to say that. He does look as if it's still wet, but nothing. Absolutely dry. So yeah, but he's had 2 coats. I always like to prime things well. You want the paint to stick, and primer is the go-to medium between the surface and the paint in whatever you're doing. Always put the time in if you can on the preparation. Now I'm going to be painting him with Reaper paints with some Citadel contrast as well, which I've got there. There you can see that. All manner of bits and pieces. I'm not going to literally show you the whole painting process because, quite frankly, you've seen it all before, and it's no fantastic techniques that you can learn from far better painters than I. I'm just going to paint him and do it as best I can, and show you the end result and tell you my thoughts on well, what it's been like to paint. I'm quite looking forward to it. It's a fairly simple miniature. It's nice and sharp. It's one of Bobby Jackson's digital sculpts by the look of it, and yeah, I think it's going to be quite fun. So stay tuned, the next bit will be along shortly. So, just to recap, this was a production 3D print that got sent to me as part of an order. I primed it by brush with Reaper Grey primer, as you saw, with 2 coats. Painted it using a mix of Citadel Contrast, Reaper Insight and Vigello paints. And the finished version that you see in the picture here, currently rotating, is not varnished. So what do I think? Well, the views here are my own and my own experience, so take from that what you will. I liked it. It had very little clean-up to do. It was a nice clean print. Beauty with, of course, 3D prints is no mould lines, and that can be a pain on figures, as you know. It's a fairly simple miniature. It's a digital sculpt by Bobby Jackson. And, you know, it represents what it should quite nicely, but there isn't a great deal of alternative textures or anything on it to confuse the 3D printer. The material it's made from is hard and rigid, and that I like. It's certainly not bones. It's nearer bones black, and it's nearer the Sirecast. It's quite good stuff. And the details on it were nice and crisp. That said, there weren't an awful lot of textures. The cons, well, this is a little more subjective, perhaps it's down to me, but the contrast paints directly onto the primer didn't work. Normally they should shade, you should get a bit left at the highlights, and the deeper tone should go into the recesses. And this was slippery. Even with a couple of coats of Reaper primer on, it just didn't work. The paints pooled in the bottom, and it just made a mess. I had to go over it with ordinary paint, and then the contrast paints would work. So, yeah, there is something there. Quite possibly a different primer. If you use a rattle can spray primer, or from a different manufacturer, something that's perhaps a bit more matte, then it would work. But as this was a Reaper figure, I wanted to test it with Reaper paints. The material. Now, as I said before, it's hard and it's rigid, and that's nice. It gives you a nice firm surface to paint on, things aren't giving, and it's going to stand well in the packet. But equally, how are thin sections going to work? I'm talking about sword blades, spear shafts, daggers, things of that nature. And it worries me that this is going to be brittle. I haven't seen anything so far where they have produced a thin section in it. I would be very pleased and interested to see if when they do. But I do have misgivings that I think it is going to be a bit brittle for, alright, putting in a blister pack, because they do get rattled about. And, alright, seeing how things come through, whether whole or broken. So we'll have to see on that. Overall, I think it's an interesting new development. It could be the end of multi-part miniatures, because with the 3D printing process, you can create much more dynamic poses, which traditionally have had to be cut up, moulded separately, and then put together by the end user. So that's an interesting thing. We need to see how the thin sections are going to come through, but I'm looking forward to it. Reaper are obviously looking into this for a long-term development, and I think, on the whole, it could be good. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little review video, and stay tuned for more bits and pieces in the future. Cheerio!